Passport Studios at the historic Degas House. It's Road Gang Radio. Go to RadioNemo.com and push that button. Oh, wait, you did. Go to YouTube at Radio Nemo. Oh, wait, you are already there. And yes, Facebook is working at the Dave Nemo Show. 615-292-6366. It spells Nemo. Hey, by the way, go to truckingresearch.org. There's a lot of great information kind of, making its way across the top of that page. All kinds of stuff you can dig into and be a part of over there. Alex Leslie joins us this morning about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, actually. Education is always a big deal, and we have an education gap in regards to getting diesel technicians actually under enough hoods to keep America moving. By the way, we can have a long debate, Alex, about whether or not there's a driver shortage or quality driver shortage or any shortage at all, and then that the rates are just not high enough to actually attract people into the industry. The diesel shortage, though, and good morning, by the way, the diesel shortage in regards to mechanics is real and very much worthy of study, correct? Good morning.
Good morning, Jimmy Mack. Yeah, this is an issue where it's not just a matter of shortage, it's a matter of being qualified, right? There's a lot of hard skills that you got to have in order to be a good diesel tech, and right now we just don't have the supply of folks with those skills, certainly not coming out of schools, and people just don't have them growing up in the way that maybe 50 years ago a lot more people did.
There is I was at a Wyotech. Donna Howell Horton at the time and I were up over at Wyotech many years ago, and this is before the pandemic, and they were having a big symposium discussion about why Wyotech was so important to get it. It was getting funded again. It was getting back up on its legs. Here's the kicker. Wow, that's a lot of noise over there, Maddie. Sorry. But what was happening, what was so crazy was that the guys from TA Petro, Travel Centers of America, said the biggest issue that was going on is that there were people who could do the job, but they couldn't write the job either. That there was a big shortage of people who were actually able to write the work order to explain to the customer what needed to be done. That it wasn't just a matter of not knowing their way around an engine, but not having the soft skills. I mean, there's a real gap here. And I wanted to kind of dig into your study and kind of talk about this for a second, but can you kind of unpack that for us?
Unpack the study overall, or that specific? Yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah, let's start with this because there's so much here to kind of dig into. So let's talk with the methodology of what it is you guys did, how you laid it out, how you put it together, and then we'll talk about the particulars and different things you looked at. Sorry, I get really excited about this particular topic because if we can solve this, we can solve a lot of things and put a lot of Americans to work too. So.
It's a big one, right? And if you're a driver, you know that having diesel techs who can fix your truck well and also, fix it quickly, right? Because if you, the shop you use is short on techs, it's going to take them longer to get you back on the road. So, yeah, it's a huge issue. And it's something that is faced by, fleets of all sizes, owner-operators, everyone. And frankly, not just trucking. It's something that we see in bus and transit. It's an issue that, a lot of these other industries have too. So what ATRI did is, we tried to take a three-pronged approach here. And we tried to look at, the shops, what's their side of the problem, the diesel techs themselves, what's their experience of the problem, and then the training programs. And by that way, sort of getting that triangulated, all three perspectives, those three core groups, to better understand what the scope of the problem is, the source of the problem, in order to then find, where are those areas of disconnect and where are those areas where there are solutions. Because if you look at the federal data in the last 10 years, heavy truck drivers grew by 30%, the number of them employed. And at the same time, diesel techs only grew by about 23%, right? That delta there, 7 percentage points, that's an issue, right? That is the challenge that we have right now. And it's about 2/3 of shops right now in the trucking industry were understaffed in 2025.
Let me ask you a question here really quickly, because you talked about those three different viewpoints you kind of looked at, which, by the way, is a great kind of way to kind of begin a study, to begin kind of accumulating data, in the same way that when we look at stuff like bottlenecks, we don't look at them just from the driver's viewpoint, but from law enforcement and from city planners and all of that kind of stuff, to get a sense of all the different perspectives, to talk about the different solutions. What I wanted to ask you is to take us through those three segments, and I wanted to know if, in fact, the questions and the approaches were different, or if there was a consistency to what you kind of dug in with each of them. And then if you had to make changes in the study based on their responses. And am I making any sense, Alex? I hate to do this to you.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. The thing about those three surveys is we have a lot of questions that are essentially the same, in order to be able to understand, okay, what does, on this exact same issue, this exact same topic, let's get the exact same question so that we can make direct apples to apples comparisons, across techs and shops, or shops and schools. So there's, when you design a survey like this, you want to make sure that all these three parts, they fit together nicely, so that they all sort of, speak to each other, and all fill in each other's gaps, but also so that you can get a real good comparison. So that really was a key part, you correctly intuited, a key part of designing this survey, in order to, again, really understand where those disconnects happen. Where do we lose a tech? Or where does a training program maybe not measure up to what the shop needs?
What does it mean to lose a tech too? Because that's the other thing. You have the idea of, what is it, 30% increase on the truck side, 23% increase on the tech side. Is that happening in regard? Okay, here's my question: are they onboarding at the same pace, but one is losing at a faster pace than the other? In the sense that are the same amount of, are the necessary amount of diesel tech providers coming in and then either washing out or walking away from it? Or is it a matter of not being able to get people into the door to start the process at all?
It's a little bit of both. So on the one hand, most techs who start a job in the industry, they don't have formal training. And that's a lot of techs come in without formal training that are great. And a lot of them become great. But there aren't enough grads coming out of training programs in the first place. Now, on the other hand, even the ones that do, they encounter barriers. Things like the cost of tools. If you're a tech, you got to pay for your own tools. And that is not cheap, my friend. And that can be a huge challenge. You might have a tech come out of school, he's fully trained, he's ready to go, and then looks at the price tag and decides, I just can't make this work right now. Maybe I'll come back in a few years. That's a huge issue. But another issue is that even if they get a job in trucking, when we surveyed techs, we found that about 44% of them are considering a job as a tech in another industry. That's a pretty huge percent. Now, not all of them will ultimately do that, of course. Considering is different from actually acting on it. But, there are a lot of different industries that need qualified techs. And so there's a fair bit of churn. Construction is another huge industry. Ag equipment, they need good techs. And so, tech skills, it's a little different from one of those to the next, but generally transferable. And so, that's a good thing for techs, but it's a challenge sometimes for the industries who are trying to hold on to them.
It's interesting, too, because I have a good friend of mine who owns a restaurant and does very well for himself, but, of course, owning a restaurant is overwhelming. And he was sitting there at the bar with me one day at his place talking to me about it, and he said, if I told my kids what they should do with their futures, and I kid you not, this is the quote, they were working on his refrigerators in the back of his restaurant. And he said, you see those guys over there that are doing that job right now based on this bill that I have? He said, I'm going to send them all to vocational school and get them up to speed. He said, because these guys charged me an arm and a leg. And he said, this appointment took me forever to make. And you make the point of when that skill gets identified, when people realize you have that skill, people start bidding for your services. That's something else that gets left out. So this is where it's a really weird thing you're suggesting here, because if you have those mad skills, you're going to go someplace where you can get funded quickly and they will help you buy the tools. Are you suggesting that there is the possibility here that not enough trucking companies and not enough transportation companies and not enough service companies are actually figuring out ways to get the young men and women who want to do this kind of work the equipment they need so they don't have to lay out the kind of money they have to lay out, whereas other industries like maybe construction, maybe HVAC, maybe refrigerator repair is saying, I'll tell you what, dude, we will send you to the Votech school to get you your finishing, and then we'll turn around and buy you all your tools if you'll stick around with us for a couple of years. I realize I'm out now speculating in the weeds, but I'm also talking about like Republic Services, which basically bought an old airport in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and turned it into a training school for its diesel technicians over a 2-year period. Is this what's happening here? Is trucking being outbid? Is transportation being outbid? Is that part of the problem?
It is definitely part of the problem. It's not the only part of the problem, but it is part of the problem. So, and again, you can see this in federal data. You can see it in some of the data we collected. Trucking techs, they tend to make less money than techs in some other industries. And the thing about tools is it is a little bit of a, there are pros and cons, right? Because if a tech owns his own tools, those are the tools he likes or she likes. She's going to take those with her if she switches jobs. She knows how they work. She likes how they feel. Techs, once they have their own tools, they like that they have their own tools and that nobody else is going to go messing around with them. But it's one of those barriers, right? And even the training for a tech, that doesn't happen overnight. There is sometimes an idea, even among people who want to go into vocational trades like this, they sometimes think that it's going to be real quick and they're going to hit the job running and make a bunch of money right away. And, it's not. It's not like that. It's not a get rich quick card. It takes some time to train, the additional process of getting yourself certified at higher levels and on additional equipment, that takes time too. So all this, it does take some time. And then I will say beyond pay, we looked at a lot of other factors in our report on what techs really want in a job and what leads them to leave or look for other jobs. And pay is certainly a big factor there. But one of the things we found is that two of the biggest factors that lead techs to look for new jobs are variety of work and work being interesting. Right? A lot of times diesel techs get into this or they stay in it because they like the problem. They like something that's interesting, something that's new, and being able to, really kind of dig into that. Right? Get under the hood is a phrase for the reason. It doesn't mean, be an automaton, right? It's solve a problem, get creative even. And so a lot of techs, if they don't have that, if they don't feel that at a job, they might go somewhere else. And so, as far as the trucking industry, sometimes the shift to preventative maintenance, for example, that's not as exciting as some of the more complicated repair jobs. So there's a bit of a balance there too that can lead some techs to leave.
By the way, just to kind of give you guys a sense of what's going on here, and Alex Leslie joins us this morning from ATRI. Go to truckingresearch.org. Your numbers suggest that 44% of trucking techs are considering a job as a tech in another industry, which is, the green pastures. The grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. And it seems to me that part of what your study has found is kind of a soft skill. And I don't mean a soft skill on the part of the techs themselves, but that the people who are in the trucking industry recruiting and retaining have to figure out ways to keep the intellectual curiosity of a tinkerer. It really is fascinating because so much of this country is founded on garages, whether it's the economic clusters of Detroit in the early 20th century creating the automotive industry, or the garages in the, up in the Pacific Northwest and Silicon Valley creating the, the technology that is actually driving the world right now, which is internet technology. People are always looking for what's next. The question is in regards to this kind of approach is what kind of outside the box thinking then can trucking companies and transportation companies engage in that would allow them to retain these men and women? And by the way,
Yeah.
there is an untapped market, and you very, I think very wisely and very insightfully have been referring to this mechanic, this technician, as a she. There's a real opportunity here for women in the workforce in regards to onboarding more women into jobs that are worthy of their intellects and their dignity here. But what are some of the strategies that people can engage in to actually retain them? Is there anything in the numbers that suggests there might be an approach to create a more variety, intellectually stimulating atmosphere? Because, hey, man, I've worked in weatherization, insulation, and renewable resource. That stuff is changing by the minute and has all kinds of issues and problems that need to be dealt with on a regular basis. What can trucking do? And do you have suggestions?
Yeah, the full report. So we're sort of going through. We haven't officially published this one yet. You are getting the advanced data
I
out of this
buried the
one.
lead. I'm sorry. I'm apologizing to Alex, guys. You're getting on the ground information here, and I'm just acting like it's just another day at the office. Thank you for that, by the way. But yeah,
Yeah, no sweat.
when we head into this, by the way, and I was curious from your own conversations, from Rebecca Not So Punky Brewster and our good friend Alex Leslie, what's going on over there that you guys are talking about as possible suggestions?
Yeah. I mean, this aspect of the heart of the tinkerer, like I think you said there, the variety of work and the more interesting work is a big part of this. Honestly, finding ways to ensure that techs can continue learning, can continue developing skills, new technologies. These areas are important for keeping that engagement up. That's one of really the biggest factors that we've found. Another big one, of course, though, is that that shop culture is really important. Being a tech is something of a social job, right? You spend time around other techs, and shops that just kind of expect a tech to go into his corner and plug away and do his 8 hours or however many hours he's spending in there and go home. That's not necessarily something that techs are feeling right now. They want a mentor if they're a new tech. They want a sense that there's actually something going on in this shop that they're a part of. And that's a shift we're seeing across a lot of different occupations right now. It's not just techs, but certainly it is techs as well, right? I think sometimes we think about some of these trades as like, they'll just keep doing it the same way they always did. But there is indeed, generational changes in all different occupations, and techs are no exception to that.
I'm trying to kind of think here creatively, and Alex, Leslie, and I are, I'm going to put him in not a weird position, but kind of a more of a brainstorming position. So let me ask you a question. Given what you've looked at, I'll give you an idea. What if you were to say every once in a while, "Hey, we're gonna send you over." We were talking about Europe this morning. A number of our listeners are veterans who have served overseas, and we're talking about the cultural differences. There are massive technologically differences across both oceans, in Japan, in Southeast Asia, over in Europe. I mean, does it behoove us to kind of say, hey, and 2 weeks out of the year, we're going to send you across the pond to go look at other kind of tech people, to go look at the way they handle these problems and this kind of approach and the kind of technologies they have over there? I mean, what kind of outside the box thinking, including the idea of mentorship, should people be looking at in regards to kind of getting people more interested? I mean, it's not just a matter of having a barbecue every Friday at the tech shop. That's fun and that's groovy when they bring in the ice chest and all that. We do that over here at the Degas house. But, I mean, are there like really outside the box approaches that you guys get a chance to, or is the industry stuck? That's the big thing too. Did you find, green shoots of hope? In regards to, wow, that's right, this group is doing it right, this seems to be effective. And you don't have to give it away until the report comes out, but were you finding anything that was promising?
Yeah. And I will say, sometimes the solutions aren't as out of the box as they seem. Sometimes it just means taking a solutions-oriented approach or an honest approach about, hey, this is a bigger problem. Going about this the same way that we've always done isn't going to cut it. So things like cycling responsibilities, or even just, getting techs certified on additional stuff, getting them through those certs. That's not rocket science. And yet we find that there's a pretty big difference between, the haves and the have-nots in terms of shops that encounter this problem, that have a bunch of vacancies that, are understaffed, and then the shops that aren't understaffed, actually. So it's actually, there is quite a bit of hope, but it's a matter of, it's not going to be business as usual if you want to sort of solve the problem. Another thing that a lot of shops have done and is looking at, how can we get better hours for our techs? How many do we really need on third shift? Can we move some of those spots to first or second shift? It's going to potentially improve retention, especially, if you've got young parents or just young techs in general, looking at, what can we do on the shift side of things? And of course, any of those little steps that you take are going to not only make the tech more likely to stay in a practical sense, but they show that you actually, give a hoot. And that obviously creates some appreciation down the line.
And by the way, I'm reading from the notes that Alex sent me, by the way, and this is where there's a core here that I think comes back to. We had a great talk on the recruiter roundtable about recruiting for Brown Dog Trucking, and the recruiter that we talked to that day, he made a really big point of being honest in the way that you just were about the idea that there isn't an overnight fortune. There are a lot of tech schools, not most of the legitimate ones, but there are a lot of tech schools who are telling a lot of tall tales about how much money you're going to make and how fast. And the idea, Daniel Mustafa has talked to me about this too. If you're willing to plug away, and I wonder if it's a cultural situation in the sense that so many people want a purpose-driven life and want a job that pays them incredibly well in the beginning, and that's a big, big shift for a lot of people because most people didn't grow up with that. The last 25 years we have, but it's cost of tools, lack of knowledge, poor shop onboarding training as barriers to becoming a tech in trucking. The idea that people aren't figuring out, it's that window in the first year, it seems like. If you can get them through that first year and keep them around, the retention rates seemingly improve. I don't know what the numbers suggest there, Alex, but it seems to be that the really big issue right now is that transitional period from the desire to be in tech and then bringing people on board into tech seems to be the real danger zone for a lot of companies. Is that fair from what the numbers suggested?
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely, we didn't dig a ton into that, looking at those exact shades of, what's your retention at this year's section or that year's section. But it certainly is an expectation versus reality. That is certainly a place where some techs, move out. But the other thing to say is that different industries offer techs different kinds of opportunities, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? The thing you want to make sure is that as an industry in trucking, we're saying, hey, this is what trucking can offer you as a tech versus what construction maybe can offer you as a tech. Because, there are going to be some other industries where there is a greater variety of work. You have more unusual stuff come in the shop each day. Ag techs, they encounter such a huge variety of materials and practically a museum worth of materials if you see how old some of those tractors are that they spend their time on. But there are trade-offs for that. And I think sometimes it's a matter of being honest about, hey,
there it is.
What it looks like to be a trucking tech. You're going to have certain benefits. You're going to have certain things that, maybe are better in other industries. And some techs are going to want to choose trucking. Some techs are going to want to choose construction. And that's okay. But I think owning what we're good at owning the kind of position that is unique to trucking, I think that goes a long way too to helping attract people, but also to prevent some of that lost time in turning over from one to the next.
By the way, and this is something I'm just going to add on a personal level, I think it's really important too because I have two producers over here. They love the job that they do, but I have told them both point blank, and I've told everybody that's ever worked for us point blank, there's going to be a point where something better is going to come along, something that might get you closer to the dreams you have for your personal life. I think creating an atmosphere where the employee knows that they're not consistently under threat or having passive-aggressive guilt trips thrown their way, but that you're constantly committed to their growth as a tech while understanding that other things may come along actually helps you retain them a little bit longer or at least onboard the next incoming tech and creates mentors when you have to replace people. Alex, there is so much more to talk about. You got to come back at some point when we get the report in full bloom. Promise me you will, brother, because, man, this is a conversation that could go on for a while. We haven't even touched on, you got to it at the end, the idea of just telling people the truth. It's amazing. It's amazing if you read all of this stuff, and like I said, this isn't even the full report, but if you read all this stuff, man, it just gets into basically tell people what's really going on because it means the people you get know what they're getting themselves into, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always happy to come on and talk, Jimmy Mack.
My friend, what are you doing this weekend, by the way? It is Throttle Thursday, and as far as New Orleans is concerned, Thursday is such the new Friday that we turn Wednesday into the new Friday. So what are you doing this weekend?
Good for you. Well, last weekend was kind of my weekend off. I was actually up north here in Minnesota and doing a bunch of wilderness canoe camping. So this weekend I kind of got to catch up on a bunch of junk.
Oh, well, at least you have the canoes to remember fondly. Alex Leslie, of course, who is a senior research assistant over at ATRI. Go to truckingresearch.org. By the way, they serve everybody, and as Lindsay likes to say, both kinds, all kinds, from the big boys and the fat cats all the way to the one guy who owns only his own shop and his own truck. All that research is available for everybody. Thank you, Alex.
My pleasure.